Samaniego here, the author of the Carolingian Age series, and I am here with a good friend of mine, Jeff Rice.
Hey.
So Jeff, first off, tell us a little about yourself.
I'm from Maryland, from Baltimore originally, and I came down to here to North Carolina. I went to Chapel Hill, UNC, and now I'm the music director here at St. Raphael Catholic Church. So I was a history major, but now I'm kind of in doing music and other things.
So Jeff is much like me. He's a history major that is not in the history field.
Yes.
So, Jeff, you and I have had discussions in the past about, especially our science fiction, fantasy, love and enjoyment.
Yeah.
One of the things I always like to ask all my guests is, what was one of your first memories of that genre?
I think the two things that come across very early on, probably I think even when I was like 2 or 3, based on like the house that I remember, my dad my dad was in sort of college in the late 60s, so like when watching like Star Trek actually like on TV like was sort of cool for college students, because it was sort of cutting edge, I guess, socially and stuff like that. So I remember watching some sort of reruns, impressions of watching like the original series of Star Trek with him, like when he would be visiting me or something, like, you know, just when we were hanging out or something when I was super tiny, I think. And then I do remember when my mom and my sister, I guess, went out of town for some reason or went to visit my grandmother, and he decided, I heard there's these Star Trek movies. This was like in the mid '80s, and so he decided, it was just him and me. So he's like, we're gonna rent a video. And so we went, and it was 1986 or 87, so we rented Star Trek 4. And if you know like the story, that sort of like, it made no sense because they're like, well, where's the Enterprise? And because it starts like on Vulcan, and they're like in a stolen Klingon ship, it's like the third part of a trilogy essentially. And so it was confusing, but then I was like, awesome. So then I remember, I think there was they were gone for a few nights, and so we went and then rented like Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 3, and then after that I was pretty hooked on that. So I was probably like 8 or 9 at that time. So
yeah, you really have to watch, Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, it made a whole lot more sense.
You had to watch 2, 3, and 4 together.
Well, and I saw in Star Trek 4, like the Enterprise, you see the clip of it like blowing up. I don't know, like what?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't. So I was very out of order, all of it, but it's okay.
I think my first memory of Star Trek really was Wrath of Khan, when Khan puts the things in the ears.
I definitely remember that, because I remember coming home with I think it was must have been that same weekend, and we'd seen that movie, and then we went out and had pizza and came home at night, and there were like these giant, like, I don't know if they were like roaches, or they weren't roaches, I don't know, they were on the screen door, but they were giant, and they looked very similar to things, and I was like, oh no. So I remember being pretty freaked out by that.
Yeah, and having an older brother, kind of scared me with that scene, for me, it was definitely, so thanks Thomas, I just want to remember that. So Star Trek has always been one of the quintessential, shows of the genre. It's definitely always been what drew a lot of people in.
Yeah.
It's been probably one of the kind of the standards.
Yeah.
And definitely set a standard.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to talk about with your expertise is also the music behind Star Trek. Probably some of the most famous. So can you give me like just a little bit of your take on the score of Star Trek? Let's start with Star Trek first.
One big difference in Star Trek is that as opposed to like Star Wars, for instance, the music in Star Wars is really defined by just like one person that was pretty much writing all the music. And so there's more continuity and style, and the which is obviously a strength, and it's diversified as they've made more things. But for Star Trek, like they're right from the beginning as a TV show, so one person wrote the main theme and some of the music, but then other composers, 4 or 5 other composers wrote music for it. And then even when they made the first movie, Jerry Goldsmith came in and didn't use any. There's like one cue that uses a little bit of the original theme from this show, but besides that, wrote completely different music, which is actually a little bit they wanted it to be more Star Warsy and big and epic and that kind of thing. And then another composer wrote the set, so it's like there's been like way more than a dozen composers, and they all have different styles, and sometimes they were picked actually to do it differently stylistically than what came before. And so it's pretty, there's a few things that have remained as threads that you hear often and are repeated, but little themes, but the ways that the composers have approached them and done is much different. Like it couldn't be more different from the original show, which is almost like scored in some ways like a cartoon, like hitting all the weird moments and really accentuating everything, doing like the Looney Tunes sort of way of scoring, whereas you get to like the Next Generation and the producers basically wanted like musical like wallpaper in the background, and actually really to the point where some of the composers like they say, hey, that's that's like too much, you can't do that much, and so and everything in between. So Star Trek music is like all over the place.
I mean, it's always been one of my favorite parts is, either at the beginning or at the end, especially at the end when you get the credits and you just hear that familiar sound. It may not always be the same sound.
Yeah.
In fact, it's not. But it's still the familiar, and it's very comforting. But it's also just it gives you a little bit of the chills sometimes.
Oh yeah, there's cues I know that with my favorite things, or even some of the cues especially in the older way they use the scoring has changed so much, so it's sort of how the composers work. But if you go back to like the motion picture or Star Trek 2 or really sort of the first into like the mid 90s, you can listen to the cue of music that goes with the scene, and I know I can almost do the dialogue and exactly with what's going on at that time in the music. And I mean, you can do that with the original Star Wars movies too. But like somebody like James Horner or Jerry Goldsmith would write like an 8-minute piece of music that would like, without editing, just go with the scene, which is like and this is like before they're using really computers, and they can't just editing's a lot more difficult, and they would conduct like an 8 or a 10-minute piece of music that would go right with it, and and those guys, they just that level of skill, because of how technology has changed, doesn't really exist anymore. So it's changed.
So, as we're talking about then, kind of how things have changed. What is your take, not just musically, but in general, or if you have specifics, on the new Star Wars films?
The new Star Wars films?
I'm sorry, Star Trek. We'll get to Star Wars in a minute.
So,
forgive me.
Well, they have some of the same issues, the reboot, the 2009, what they call like the Kelvin universe, because it's the Kelvin is the ship that ends up changing everything, the course of the lives of everybody.
That's true.
So like with a lot of like J.J. Abrams films, including the Star Wars films, like the 2009 movie I think is very like effective, and it's emotional, compelling, and it's I think it's stunning. I like how he does for the most part action sequences. He tries to do things in a like much more tactile way than you see in a lot of movies these days. He tries to, like, if he can shoot it for real, he tries to do that, which is really cool. Like on Star Trek or Star Wars, it makes it to me much more real. But the thing is, then, and thematically, I think with characters, he's pretty strong, and he obviously has a really good rapport with actors. Like I think he gets really good performances out of actors. You just don't want to think too hard about the plot because it like takes 2 seconds to have this just huge holes and it just doesn't make, like, you can just figure, like, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, and in science fiction, you have that. There can be questions, but some of these are just like you just didn't even, like, somebody didn't even think this through very carefully, or they did and they just like decided they didn't care. And sometimes it's inexplicable because it's like, oh, well, you could have just done this and it would have made sense. But that's a problem that I see with those movies. But on the same thing, you can't really complain that they're making Star Trek, and those definitely led to like all the TV stuff that's going on right now. And the Picard series is going to come in like next week, which is super exciting. So and there's going to be a cartoon called Lower Decks, which I'm really excited about. It's going to be pretty cool, like an adult kind of like cartoon, and all that kind of started with like the reboot of that and showing people that you can still make money with Star Trek, which for like it was just gone for like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, there was a very a lull since the last movie.
Yeah,
the last movie of the New Generation era.
Right, which was big bust, and then the TV show.
Which I actually love that movie.
Yeah, I mean it
was really good.
It has issues, but going back, it's not the worst thing. So
True.
Yeah,
sure. So right now, Star Wars is on there. Now I am talking about Star Wars at this point. We are changing it. It's on everyone's mind because we just had the release of Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
Which is the end of that. I don't know what 9 movies would be. The 3 trilogies.
Yeah.
The trilogy of the trilogies.
Yeah.
So we have The Mandalorian, which has now finished its first season.
Yeah.
Everyone's excited about.
Yeah.
There's talk of new movies coming out in various forms, and obviously they're all rumors right now.
Yeah.
But one of the mainstays of all Star Wars, and we kind of touched on it earlier, was the music.
Yeah.
So what do you think about in terms of another film in the same genre with a very popular score?
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on that as well?
So it's first with the trilogy, the 3 trilogies, I guess. That's just. I mean, I think that's unprecedented that the same composer over a period of over 40 years scores, they obviously, like, nobody seemed to have an idea where this last trilogy was going, which is problematic. So obviously John Williams probably didn't have too much of an idea, but he did have, I think, ideas about in the original, even the original sort of 6 stories, some of what was going on, and then was able to sort of use that overarching thing to create themes and motifs that really hit things. And I just think it's amazing that, obviously the first movie there's 4 or 5 just like iconic themes in that first movie alone, and then, like, fast forward to especially The Force Awakens, and the theme for Rey to me, that might be the best actual music in the whole, out of all 9 movies. He's you can't, like, everybody like loves John Williams, and I don't think you can possibly like say how good he is at like what he does. It's just unprecedented. And I love, some of the music that's been done. The Rogue One score was pretty good. I loved the Solo movie score was awesome. I thought it fit in really well. John Powell, and then and then the Mandalorian music is like it's different, but it completely but it's chill and it like it's chill at the beginning and it which is he's sort of like a chill it just fits it really really well. So but then it kind of gets big and Star Warsy and so I love the music for the Mandalorian for sure, and I love the series and that it goes in a different directions.
Oh, it's definitely different. I think, and I think that's going to help pull a lot of fans back in.
Yeah.
And bring in a lot of new fans in.
Oh yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
So real quick as we kind of wrap up, so what are you reading or watching currently now?
Well, I am reading a book called Creativity Inc., which is all about. It's by Ed Catmull, who is one of the founders of Pixar, and it's about how to be like how to manage a organization that is that's business is like creativity, and when you're diving into like how it has a lot of stories about how these movies were made and the Pixar movies and how to foster like creativity, and I think that's important. That really is important when you're looking at like Disney and the things that have worked for Disney, for instance, like Marvel and that like, and a lot of it was just putting trust and letting creative people be creative and go in kind of different and new directions. And whereas like in some of the stuff that's going on with the Star Wars movies, I think it was like they were trying to accomplish too many things and there was too much like outside weight going on, and just in reading that and how Pixar has been really successful at like making big movies that are commercially viable but also like innovative and creative, so that's been really interesting, and then we've talked about my daughter is 10 and we've been going back and starting to actually reread like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings with her, and that's kind of neat. So
cool.
she loves fantasy and Greek mythology and a lot of that genre, so
that's cool.
Yeah, and then and I am definitely excited for the Picard series. That's going to be pretty neat. And as a history buff, I haven't seen that in 1917 yet, but I definitely want to go.
Yeah, I definitely want to check that out.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for talking to me today,
Yeah.
and I hope we get to talk soon again.
Sounds good.
Again, I'm Joseph S. Samiego, the author of the Carolingian Age series, and I'm here with good friend Jeff Rice, and we'll see you next time. Take care.